The rain was coming down in sheets as I drove home, the wipers of my old Ford struggling to keep up. I was late, as usual. Working two jobs to make ends meet wasn't easy, but I did it for Emily. She was everything to me. We'd been married for 7 years, met in college, and I still got butterflies whenever she smiled at me. I pulled into the driveway of our small house in Willow Creek, a quiet suburb of Denver. The house was old, needed a lot of work, but it was ours. We'd painted it a cheerful yellow, and Emily had filled the garden with colorful flowers. As I turned off the engine, I noticed a car I didn't recognize parked down the street. It was a sleek black BMW, the kind I could only dream of owning. I shrugged it off, figuring it belonged to a neighbor visiting. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, calling out, "Honey, I'm home." The house was silent. "Emily," I called again, a little louder. Still nothing. I walked into the living room, dropping my keys on the small table near the door. The TV was off, the room was tidy just as she always kept it. I went to the kitchen, hoping she was cooking or maybe just relaxing with a book. The kitchen was empty, but there was a note stuck to the fridge with a magnet. It was in Emily's handwriting. "Gone to visit my sister, be back late. Love you." My heart sank a little. I'd been looking forward to spending the evening with her. I knew she hadn't seen her sister Ava in a while, but she hadn't mentioned anything about going today. Ava lived in Boulder, about an hour's drive away. I sighed and grabbed a beer from the fridge. I guess it would just be me tonight. I spent the evening watching TV and working on a crossword puzzle. Around 10 p.m. I started to get a little worried. Emily hadn't texted or called, which wasn't like her. I tried calling her cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's me. Just checking in. Give me a call when you get a chance." I left the message, trying to sound casual, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I tried calling Ava, but she didn't answer either. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe they were out to dinner or a movie and hadn't heard their phones. But as the hours ticked by, my anxiety grew. Midnight came and went, and still no word from Emily. I couldn't sleep. I kept pacing the floor, replaying every possible scenario in my head. Maybe she'd had an accident. Maybe her car had broken down. I tried to stay calm, but my mind was racing. Around 2 a.m., I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I had to do something. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door. I decided to drive to Boulder and check on them. The rain had stopped, but the roads were still wet and slick. The drive was long and lonely, and every mile felt like an eternity. As I drove, I couldn't help but think about Emily. We'd been through so much together. We'd supported each other through college, helped each other find jobs, and dreamed of a future together. We'd always been so close, so in love. But lately, things had felt different. Emily had been distant, preoccupied. She'd been working longer hours at her job as a marketing assistant, and when she was home, she seemed tired and withdrawn. I tried to talk to her about it, but she just brushed it off, saying she was stressed about work. I wanted to believe her, but a part of me wondered if there was something more going on. As I neared Boulder, I started to feel a knot in my stomach. I didn't know what I was going to find, but I had a feeling it wasn't going to be good. I arrived at Ava's apartment around 3 a.m. It was a small, one-bedroom place in a rundown building near the university. I parked the car and walked up to the front door, my heart pounding in my chest. I knocked loudly, hoping to wake them up. After a few minutes, the door creaked open. Ava stood there, rubbing her eyes, her hair a mess. She looked surprised to see me. "John, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice groggy. "Emily's not answering her phone." I was worried. "Is she here?" I asked, my voice trembling. Ava hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside. "She's here," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I walked into the apartment, my eyes scanning the room. The living room was empty, but I could hear voices coming from the bedroom. I walked towards the door, my hand shaking as I reached for the knob. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. What I saw in that room shattered my world. Emily was in bed, tangled in the sheets with a man. It wasn't just any man. It was my best friend, Michael, my best friend since childhood. The man who had stood by my side through thick and thin. The man I trusted more than anyone else in the world. They were both asleep, completely naked. I stood there, frozen in shock, unable to move or speak. The room started to spin, and I felt like I was going to be sick. All the doubts, all the suspicions, all the things I had tried to ignore suddenly came crashing down on me. It was all true. Emily was cheating on me, and she was doing it with my best friend. The betrayal was so deep, so profound, that it felt like a physical blow. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to destroy everything in sight. But I couldn't. I was paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of the pain. I stumbled backward out of the room and into the living room. Ava was standing there watching me, her face pale. "I'm so sorry, John," she said, her voice barely audible. I tried to stop them, but I didn't say anything. I just stared at her, my eyes filled with tears. I couldn't understand how this could be happening. How the two people I loved and trusted the most could do this to me. I turned and walked out of the apartment, leaving Ava standing there alone. I got into my car and started driving, not knowing where I was going. I just needed to get away, to escape the pain. I drove for hours, aimlessly wandering the streets of Boulder, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't stop the images from replaying in my head. Emily and Michael together in bed. The betrayal, the lies, the deceit. It was all too much to bear. As the sun began to rise, I found myself parked on a deserted road overlooking the city. I sat there staring out at the horizon, trying to make sense of what had happened. I felt like my whole life had been a lie. Everything I had believed in, everything I had worked for, had been taken away from me in an instant. I thought about Emily, about all the years we had spent together. I remembered our wedding day, the promises we had made, the dreams we had shared. How could she do this to me? How could she throw it all away for a moment of pleasure with someone else? And Michael, my best friend. The man who had always been there for me. How could he betray me like this? How could he sleep with my wife? The questions swirled around in my head, but I had no answers. All I knew was that my life would never be the same. I knew I couldn't stay in Willow Creek. I couldn't face Emily and Michael every day, pretending that everything was okay. I needed to start over, to rebuild my life from scratch. I drove back to Willow Creek, my mind made up. I went to the house and packed a bag, throwing in some clothes, my passport, and a few personal items. I didn't take anything that reminded me of Emily. I didn't want to be reminded of the pain. Before I left, I wrote a note. "Emily, I know what you did. I saw you. I'm leaving. Don't try to find me." I left the note on the kitchen counter and walked out the door, not looking back. I drove to the airport and bought a one-way ticket to Madrid. I'd always wanted to visit Spain, to learn the language, to experience the culture. It was a random choice, but it felt right. I needed to go somewhere far away, where I could escape the memories and start a new life. I spent the next few months traveling around Spain, trying to heal my broken heart. I learned Spanish, met new people, and saw amazing places. I volunteered at a local animal shelter, helping to care for abandoned dogs and cats. It was therapeutic to focus on something other than my own pain. I slowly began to piece my life back together, to find a new sense of purpose. I realized that I couldn't let Emily and Michael's betrayal define me. I had to move on, to find happiness again. One day, while I was volunteering at the animal shelter, I met a woman named Sofia. She was a veterinarian, and she was passionate about helping animals. We started talking, and I was immediately drawn to her warmth and kindness. We began spending time together, exploring the city, going to museums, and trying new restaurants. I found myself laughing again, feeling alive again. Sofia was different from Emily. She was strong, independent, and honest. She had a way of making me feel like I could be myself, without having to pretend or hide my emotions. I started to fall in love with her, and I knew that she felt the same way about me. After a year in Spain, I decided to return to the United States. I wanted to be closer to my family, and I felt like I was ready to face my past. I moved to Seattle, a city I had always dreamed of living in. I got a job as a software engineer, a field I had studied in college. I bought a small apartment overlooking the Puget Sound, and I started to build a new life for myself. I stayed in touch with Sofia, and we made plans for her to visit me in Seattle. When she arrived, it felt like no time had passed. We spent a week exploring the city, hiking in the mountains, and enjoying each other's company. At the end of the week, I knew that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. I proposed to her on a ferry overlooking the Seattle skyline, and she said yes. We got married a few months later in a small ceremony with our closest friends and family. It was the happiest day of my life. 2 years later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Emily. I hadn't heard from her since I left Willow Creek. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should even open it, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the letter and began to read. John, I know I hurt you deeply, and I'm so sorry for what I did. I know that nothing I can say will ever make up for the pain I caused you, but I want you to know that I regret everything. Michael and I are no longer together. He left me for someone else a few months after you left. I guess karma caught up with me. I've been struggling to make ends meet, and I'm living in a small apartment in Denver. I know you'll probably never forgive me, but I hope that one day you can find it in your heart to understand. I was lost and confused, and I made a terrible mistake. I hope you're happy, John. You deserve it. I finished reading the letter and sat there for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. I felt a pang of sadness for Emily, but I also felt a sense of closure. I realized that I had forgiven her, not for her sake, but for my own. I couldn't let the anger and resentment consume me any longer. I had moved on, I had found happiness again, and I wasn't going to let the past ruin my future. I crumpled up the letter and threw it in the trash. I went to find Sofia and I wrapped my arms around her. I love you, I said, my voice filled with emotion. I love you too, she replied, her eyes shining with happiness. I knew that I had made the right choice, that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The betrayal had been a painful chapter in my life, but it had also led me to something beautiful. I had learned to love again, to trust again, and to appreciate the simple things in life. And for that I was grateful. The rain is still falling here in Seattle, a gentle patter against the window pane. I'm sitting in my living room watching Sofia play with our two children, a boy and a girl. They're laughing and giggling, their faces lit up with joy. I smile, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. I have everything I ever wanted. A loving wife, two beautiful children, a comfortable home, and a fulfilling career. I've come a long way from that rainy night in Willow Creek when my world fell apart. I've learned that life can be unpredictable, that people can disappoint you, and that sometimes the greatest betrayals come from those you trust the most. But I've also learned that you can overcome anything, that you can find happiness again, and that love can heal even the deepest wounds. So to anyone out there who's been betrayed, who's been hurt, who's lost hope, I want you to know that you're not alone. You can get through this. You can rebuild your life. You can find happiness again. Just don't give up. Keep believing in yourself, keep trusting in love, and keep moving forward. The sun will shine again, I promise you. And when it does, you'll be stronger, wiser, and more grateful than ever before.